Dr. Sachidanand Shukla, and a few others whose names I have noted. Shri Sundar, who is joining us virtually. Thank you, sir, for taking interest. And all those who have joined in the virtual mode, warm welcome. And we have structured this today's talk on the post-budget analysis. Roughly one day back, the budget was presented. So I try my best to debrief this. There could be a billion interpretations in this big country. Almost everyone is worried about what is there in store for me. Your CA would explain that to you in greater detail, so there will be more disappointment when it comes to the question of calculating your tax liability. But all in all, I consider this budget to be very progressive to start with. We'll go step by step in understanding this budget. My role would be trying to explain to you the role of fisc, what the governments would be and should be doing. Are they doing the same, or they are doing it deviantly, or what has been the achievement so far? How are we poised to become a much larger and much more richer economy than merely becoming a larger economy? And to us personally, how this budget is going to benefit? No one is poised to get any harm from this budget per se, that can be assured. When we look at these budgets all over the world, we have the data. If you can explain more, full slide.
It is in FY.
So fiscal policy is a very, very important public policy of the governments all over the world. From 228 countries, we receive the data on a continuous basis. Unfortunately, we don't get for each year from all countries. That is not possible. Some countries are supplying to the IMF, to the World Bank, and others little outdated data, a couple of years back. Some are even supplying 4-5 years back data. But by and large, when we look at the macro picture, 35 trillion US dollars, 25 trillion US dollars, gap is 10 trillion US dollars, is overspending by all governments of the world put together. Without that, life on this planet Earth would be much worse than what it is, with 80% of the world population residing in the poorer countries, less than 20% roughly residing in the advanced countries. The third world countries primarily are subjected to spend more than what they receive, and that defies our individual calculations. As individuals, we all try to live within our means. That is what has been told to us from the childhood, that don't stretch your legs beyond what the blanket can cover. So this doesn't apply to the governments all over the world, for the very obvious reason that the governments have very complex obligations to fulfill, whereas we don't have some obligations, thankfully. We will try to see what are those obligations and how they try to fulfill. These are, some of them are developmental, some of them are constitutional, which they can't wish away. Some of them are administrative, which includes providing some quantity of governance and some quality of governance. This costs from 4.3 million central government employees. The adherence to the fiscal prudence after the passage of the FRBM Act, Fiscal Responsibility Budget Management Act, the number of government employees under the union government has been systematically brought down from 4.3 million to 3.18 million, and the government has announced in its first tenure in 2014 that maximum governance and minimum government, and it is trying to adhere to that. nevertheless, as the pay commission's burden, make these governments to pay out more, both in the form of DNS allowance and DNS relief to the serving employees and the retirees respectively. The burden is, in absolute terms, is not coming down, but going forward, the fiscal prudence also will be ensured in the Indian context. Moving on, every segment of the society expects, some gift from the government of India, for which they are not presenting the budget to the parliament. They have an obligation to seek the mandate of the parliament, as is the practice in a democracy. What is sought for is generally not accepted in toto by the governments, even in the richest country like United States, where the amount sought for could be much more, or the amount sanctioned is $5.8 trillion US. Ours compares not very appealing when you contrast with the most advanced country in the world. As opposed to 5.8 trillion, ours works out to be almost a tenth of that at 548 plus billion US, half a trillion to be precise. Half a trillion versus nearly 6 trillion as the year comes to close for United States. But this is the reality. Nowhere the national assemblies or parliaments would sanction whatever is sought for by the FM or by the president. There is some budgetary constraints or restrictions. You can't be spending the way you want because it is going to put some burden on the fisc. At the same time, we can't be satisfying different groups which may have conflicting interests. Like if you want to help the exporters by allowing the rupee to get depreciated, for example, it might affect the exporters, the importers, who may have to end up paying higher price for the import that they are making, be it essential or non-essential import. Likewise, the depositors expect the term deposit interest rates to be kept very high, whereas the investors, the borrowers, the firms want these interest rates to be global, on par with the globally acceptable lending rates. So whereas in countries like Japan, some of the advanced Gulf countries, vast majority of Europe or United States, when the lending rates are very low, like 2.5–3%, if our industries or our businesses are given by our local banks at about 9.5%, they may not be globally competitive. So that is another challenge that the finance minister or any ministry presenting the budget to the parliament will have to keep in mind. Protecting the domestic firms as well as allowing the foreign firms to come into this country, we have to have some kind of a trade-off in the form of the tariffs. If tariffs are lowered, then domestic firms are not very happy with that, whereas global investments will flow in, and so on. You need to be therefore balancing out all these various groups who matter to the government. But they have mastered this art of articulating their policies and their thoughts. And by and large, in Indian context, majority of the segments or the stakeholders in India, they are highly convinced, looking at merely the progress that we have achieved. If you see from 1991 till 2022–23, the progress has been 129 times. I repeat, 1990–91 to 22–23, the country's nominal GDP has grown by 129 times. Okay. And the statistics speak the facts. The world has now started recognizing India. That would have been around $260 billion US. We are now 3.61 trillion US. So statistics have silenced the so-called global community, which was criticizing India as an economy, left, right, center, in the early 80s and even on the eve of our opting for economic reforms. By and large, we are adhering to what a quasi-judicial body called the Finance Commission, the latest 50 encasings chairmanship, has recommended that the states deserve about 40+% of the total resources. So they are giving almost 37+%, which is a good sign. While commenting about the budget or analyzing the budget, we try to be as acceptable as possible in the sense that instead of
more audience.
yeah, instead of trying to judge it from a standpoint, it's better if we have acceptable parameters and we try to analyze the budget on the basis of these widely accepted parameters to assess or evaluate a budget of a state or of a country. These include we have welfare as a parameter. It's provided for. We have a socialistic pattern of development. That is what is included in the Constitution of India. So therefore, welfare is one of the important parameters. Whether or not we are achieving growth, we are to see on the basis of the impetus or the kind of a support that it would be, the budget would be providing for the further growth of this economy. As are some predictions, our economy is likely to grow in the coming financial year at the rate of about 6.5. They have provided a range which works out to 5 around 6.5. And whether or not the ones who are well versed with the arithmetic or with the granular details of the budget, they can easily make out whether the budget is intrinsically sound or it is just a speech with certain numbers put as per a format provided. You have certain 17 items in which you have to fill some values, and these values in today's scenario, you have all these formulae put so that you don't make any blunder in arriving at these figures. So these are the 4 parameters on which we attempt judging. I deliberately chose this history of providing 10 years of rotation. The year's GDP and the year's expenditure commitment by this budget estimate, commitment made by the incumbent finance minister of that time. And I worked out that pre-elections, the budget, and one thing that you may notice in this table is that so methodically in India, the budgets are decided by a team of expert economists, IES and other secretaries who would help for about 150 days for each year's budget. They try to keep it in a very, very meticulously worked out narrow band. It's something like some 12.5 to under 15 of the year's budget, year's GDP, and for the year 2023-24, the GDP that's mentioned in the footnote of budget at a glance reads 3 crores. That would be our GDP expected by the finance ministry for the coming year. 3 crore, 1 lakh, something, slightly over 3 crores.
Last figure, no? Last figure on the table.
Yes, I highlighted, but thank you, sir. 3 crore plus, slightly marginally above 3 crores. And if we drop that, rest of the figures as part of the GDP, including the revenue deficit, fiscal deficit, so on, will work out. Otherwise, there is a scope for a revision, small or minute revision in the values.
So just for comparison process, you talked about US budget being 5.
5.8.
It's almost 25% of the GDP.
Yes, exactly, sir. We are still at about 30 to 15% range. Theirs is close to 25%. Yes.
And is this true for all developed, like economies, Germany and?
Some advanced countries, one is social responsibilities, the pensions and other healthcare.
Germany would be even higher.
This is the burden. IMF has been, as we all know, that it has been cautioning. Of course, the power of IMF today, on IMF website it tells you, literally today, 1 trillion is maximum, 25% of that is utilized by IMF. It's just 250 billion, that is the exposure to various countries. Some of the Asian countries also are beneficiaries. India has not taken, thankfully, a single US dollar from 1990-91. Single US dollar from IMF. That is a great achievement, so to say. So generally there is a tendency, I suggest the students of Executive MBA and those who may be watching it virtually, 3rd October 2001, Dr. Y.V. Reddy, as Deputy Governor of Reserve Bank of India, later he became Governor, he delivered second foundation lecture at IIM Indore, Central Bank Autonomy Changing Contours in India is the title, delivered on 3rd October. In that, he gives all sorts of compulsions, quoting a 56 central banks survey, wherein there is a bias not only in India. He was very candid, 1965 IAS and a PhD, very candid, very vocal. So there is an inherent tendency across the globe, more so in the developing countries, for the governments to spend more on the eve of elections, and that is by and large true in India. These are my personal opinions. I am not talking this as a professor or a member of SU. Then the 4th parameter that we have seen in the previous slides, majority of socially or economically underprivileged sections, they are expected to receive the benefit, as it has been the case all along the planned era in the Indian context. And for people who are on the verge of retirement or have just retired, there is a very beautiful news, good news, that earlier on the senior citizens had an opportunity to invest up to 15 lakh rupees. In one go, the amount has been increased from 15 to 30 lakhs. Same is the case with the post office. It is earlier till this 31st March, 4.5 lakh. That's also raised to 9 lakhs. So these are some good things whereby a senior citizen is going to receive a 1%, which works out to 1 crore, 1 lakh as a thumb rule. 1 crore, if you save, 1 lakh additional you will get. If there is a 1% addition, it is in fact close to 1.5%. So fantastic. The other benefits I have not provided for in this small table because the font size would reduce. There are quite other welfare related ones that they have spelled out for each of the segments of the economy. As far growth is concerned, growth of about 6.5 to 7% in today's globally challenging economic scenario, where US, entire Europe, according to the World Economic Forum 17 to 22, they have deliberated, and the chief economist survey reveals, which is available for you people to just go through. They have provided for where are the growth risks, where are the inflation related challenges that need to be faced by the regions, is provided for in that World Economic Forum website, front page. So in such a scenario where the world growth is likely to be around 2.7 to 2.8%, 6+% for a country with our kind of challenges is no ordinary achievement, so to say. So on growth front, we can consider this budget to be quite okay. As I was mentioning, adhering to the principle stated by the Government of India in 2014, maximum governance in the form of automation, human-to-human interface is being reduced wherever it is feasible. There were times when about 35 years back, to pay to the Government of India through a government bank, we as students used to stand in a queue for about 20-30 minutes, and we used to eventually skip our lunch. So I am talking about a payment of some mess bill or those kind of stuff. In a State Bank of India, you have no other go. In your campus there is a branch. You will have to stand in the queue and make the payment. It might take about 20 minutes. If it exceeds, please forget about your lunch. That's the kind of scenario. Now, mobile banking, internet banking, and all these are some luxuries that we can't imagine that this country could do in such a short span of time. So, income tax payment, GST payments, you name it, you can do away with the human interface and eventually try to reduce whatever are expectations to provide the service. Yes, one thing that I must mention here is that there is a great degree of reduction in the welfare one component. Now that we are out of COVID, the total subsidies, the gross subsidies, they have been reduced by about 1.5 lakh crores between last year, that is the ongoing year, and the coming year. 1.5 lakh crores straight away is the food subsidy cut. Largely it is subsidy on food. So government is very, very keen and very pragmatic in its approach in all this. Arithmetic, I would not consider it as very, very exciting or a great budget. Again, personal viewpoint. Disinvestment is politically sensitive. Some governments have paid a heavy price for taking disinvestment seriously. That is, whatever CPS is, the equity has to be sold to a strategic player or to the general public. They had paid political prize money, they lost the elections. So this government, whatever it is committing and the proceeds that are realized, there is no, and that is shown as one of the capital receipts in the budget, close to some 61,000 crores. And when you look into the details, it works out to be per capita per day, 86 rupees is being spent. 45 lakh crores works out to be per capita per day, 86 rupees. In that, growth oriented is only 25-26 rupees. That's the reality. So, with the limited spending, the kind of denominator that we have as the largest society in the world, population-wise, these are certain harsh realities. And with that, when we could achieve so much of progress in the past, there is no reason to think that we would not become one of, there are different predictions by different agencies. PwC has its own prediction, then Deloitte has its prediction, IMF World Bank provides their prediction. All the predictions talk only one thing. India is poised to become number 2 in the world, number 2, I repeat, next only to China. US will be number 3, not my personal viewpoint, I give you the source also. Provided, I am very, very cautious here, majority of these surveys and these reports or these opinions of the strategists, experts is pre-Russia-Ukraine conflict. The geography is changing by the week or by the day. The diplomacy, the strategic realliances, the cordial relations that you maintain with the powerful countries, they may make some surprise. But from 5, the predictions indicate India is poised to become world's second largest, making United States to settle for third, China being number one. Okay. Let us hope it would materialize. It's good for each one of us, and we can consider ourselves to be lucky and living in highly advanced countries. So, from where we had fallen, 24.23% of the world economy, India was 24 point decimal, world's largest, nearly a quarter of world's output. This was 1701. I suggest don't go to Madison, economic historian, who has first published this data. This is quoted recently in June 2022 by incumbent RBI governor in one of his speeches publicly available. Refer to that, that is sufficient. He has quoted exactly the same, and source is Madison. From 23% we have fallen to under 1%. From 0.9 we have now risen to nearly 4 times, 3.5, 3.6. It's a substantial recovery, and the predictions suggest that we are further to rise in the coming years. Just one more slide to end. This is what I was talking developing countries are emerging economies, 7 put together. We both are there, China and India. 1995, the scenario is explained. 2015, the scenario is explained. And 2040, the scenario is projected. It's almost 20 odd years hence, so there could be a lot of dynamics. And one of our mentors had shared with me at 3:15 a.m. Day before yesterday. The precarious situation, with his expertise, the precarious situation the world is now put in, the doomsday, what according to him and his expertise is a reality. It has come very, very close because institutions have lost their importance or supremacy. Individuals are commanding. A lot depends, 20 years hence we can't talk too many things, it will be overgeneralization or just getting carried away with certain reports or predictions. A lot depends on how things would shape up. People have 1,000 times more powerful hydrogen bombs, atomic weapons that were tested in the 40s. So hoping everything safe and secure, and economies and people, they are permanent. I think we as an economy, from 5th, there will be further upward journey. How further it would be, let us all wait and see. With these few words, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I think next is Dr. Shukla.
I think I'll just make a few names because I.
Sir, please.
So thank you very much. Of course, let me congratulate Professor Shivakumar and the Department of Economics for doing this exercise. I remember I initiated that it is very important that institutions of this kind, the Institute of Management, we should create advocacy for whatever we believe, whatever we see. Of course, government will say that, of course, Nirmala Sitharaman, what was the title today in newspapers? It is Amrit Mahotsav for the middle class. And it is Amrit Kal for what the Saptarshis, inclusive development, reaching the last mile, infrastructure and investment, unleashing the potential, green growth, financial sector, youth power. And a lot of subsidies have been, almost subsidies going, they're reduced, no? Almost, that is probably a good sign. Of course, now from your analysis, you have been seeing that what is the magic behind this 13 or 14% for the last 10 years it is just like 13 or 14%. What is the magic? Of course, you can say that. So then, pre-budget I was also asked to comment on what will happen to education in the country. Because a national education policy, again, NAP 2020 is announced. And since 1968 onwards, 1968 onwards, we have been hearing that almost 6% of the GDP is going to be invested in education. If it is only 14% of the GDP in the total budget, what is that? What is it that we are talking about 6%? Of course, it has never been reached. I do not know what is the figure now in education. What is the percentage of GDP in education? It's probably very much. It is not mentioned in education. Education doesn't come at all.
Defense has a higher risk for the
Of course, there are a lot of things. For example, stipends have been mentioned, digital infrastructure. A lot of opportunities will get for youth, no doubt about it. Digital infrastructure, and new hydrogen policy, green hydrogen policy.
Like Columbia model residential.
Yeah, schools, some of these things are mentioned, but when it comes to, for example, 50,000 colleges to be converted into universities, and this we have to achieve by 2025, and where is the money for any of these things? Where is the money? What is the percentage for education now? GDP out of not even 2%. It's one and a half. But 1968, just 1968 onwards, we have been saying 6% we will invest for education. Now, of course, I'm definitely think positively about the budget. But these are for the students and the teachers. It is very important that an institution make some sort of a learner judgment or analytical judgment on budget. That will, of course, it will be knowledge for you, it will be training for you. At the same time, a credible institution, academic institution, create analytical opinion about the budget. Either way, what is the problem? Either way, that's very important. It is not just an intellectual exercise. That would also be enhance the profile of our institution. That's why I initiated immediately after the budget there should be a discussion on the budget by the institute. But you should give it. Of course, newspapers are asking. You give me the details. I will definitely put it across. That is the way. Or Ramendra will put it across. It's very important that the Institute of Management creates some sort of an opinion on the thing. You can summarize his views, all these things, and all their views put together. Put it on your website.
Yes.
And do it. Thank you very much. Of course, we have started with Ramayana. Now look at the budget. I see the Saptarshis here, no?
And we met the counselor from Panama.
Saptarshis, of course, it's good to read, definitely. Budget, what is that, a budget presentation, budget preparation. You mentioned 150 days we used to have preparing. And debriefing, even after debriefing, it is not at all, we are not, we do not know anything. But it's very important, and the analytical thinkings going behind the budget formulation. These are all very good things for the students, and ultimately you are all going to be the future Nirmala Sitharamans and all that. Thank you very much for this exercise. And of course, I will definitely analyze the education budget one day and give my view also. Thank you very much. I have 2 or 3 short meetings like that, and then catch a flight to Delhi for sustainable development.
I'll see you.
So it is called.
Thank you for
recognizing Amrita Mahotsav for the middle class. That is the title of many of the newspapers. The budget description is Amrita Mahotsav. It's so sweet to hear, but I don't know how far probably it's going to be also. Thank you. Thank you.
Rajesh, should we take
He has to go for a meeting with the chief economist of my friend.
Oh, okay.
Zoom meeting.
On the Zoom only, can you share your PPT?
Hi sir, good morning. Good morning.
Hi.
Can you just share your presentation now?
So I'm not using any slides. I think there has been a very extensive presentation from Professor Sivakumar. So I'll just share my thoughts on the budget.
Yes sir, it is good to proceed now.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Sivakumar, Dr. Rasha, and thank you, KJ Somaya, for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on the budget. Dr. Sivakumar made a very exhaustive presentation, which was a 360-degree sort of a view or lens on the budget. It also involved a lot of economic history and also certain projections for the future, as well as a detailed look at the numbers. What I want to share with everyone today is that it's very important to understand the context in economics, right? So when you are trying to come up with a budget, so think that you are the policy maker, you are the Ministry of Finance and the officials. When you set out to present the budget, which is more like a P&L for the particular year, forthcoming year, the context is really, really very important. So what has the context been? So when these ladies and gentlemen would have gotten together to frame the budget, just think of what all they would have had to think. So A, in terms of the global backdrop, there have been huge worries. I mean, if you were sitting in December, early January, or even say a month prior to that, there were multiple global headwinds. So for example, Fed continued to be very, very aggressive because inflation prints in the US continue to surprise on the upside. The job market has been very, very tight, and wage growth also continued unabated. And they have been reporting fairly decent economic growth. And the Fed, if you recall, January of last year, their interest rates were hardly anything, right? And from there, it has risen nearly 5 percentage points. Now, that's a huge rise for a large economy like the US. And please remember, the US is the marginal provider of liquidity to the world, and which is why their stance and their moves on interest rates and liquidity really matter for asset classes, for global economies, right? So they set the path for other global monetary authorities, and not very surprisingly, you would have seen the ECB and the Bank of England and everybody else following suit. In fact, the RBI was forced to jack up interest rates in India, even though our inflation prints were not as dire. For example, US inflation rates were 4 times more than their limits, right? So they're targeting 2% inflation typically, and their inflation prints are 8-9%. And likewise for the Eurozone and England and all these economies. Whereas in India, the RBI has a target of 2 to 6%, right? 4% being the midpoint, and you're allowed deviations of 200 basis points on either side. And we had inflation prints which were, say, 200 basis points higher than the RBI's tolerance level. And yet, we were forced to hike rates. So I think that continued to be a big worry. China was reading under a big COVID sort of a wave. We also had the geopolitics on China, Taiwan, and also the raging war between Russia and Ukraine, which has impacted commodity prices, inflation, cost of living globally. So on the global side, you can see that there are multiple worries, and there were a lot of known unknowns in the global side. Now coming to the domestic side, we're still talking the context, right? You have 9 state elections when you are thinking of framing the budget. And also, this is, remember, the run-up to the general elections. Next year you will have general elections. Consumption has been weak, and this year, GDP growth is likely to come off by 100 basis points. So from 7% it is likely to come off. Every forecaster has actually brought down India's real GDP growth rate. Even on the nominal growth side, we were growing at 6, are likely to grow at 15.4% in F23, and that is likely to go down to 10.5%. And that shows deceleration in momentum of growth, right? So with all this, the global context and the domestic imperatives, the government was very hard pressed to really come up with a fine sort of a balancing act. And I'm really happy to see that the government has opted for boldness, right? Why do I say that? In a politically sensitive year, and when your nominal GDP growth is going to fall, what it means is your tax growth or revenue growth is also likely to fall because it is linked to the nominal GDP growth rate. And in a year like this, when your top line is not growing, your revenues are not growing, you add added pressure of redistributing or reprioritizing expenditure, right? And I think they have really opted for boldness. They have gone in for a big capital expenditure oriented budget, right? And I think this also symbolizes risk taking of a very high order. As you all know, we are a noisy democracy, and there are political pressures on the government, especially in difficult times. You remember, post-COVID, there has been a major problem with incomes, jobs, especially in the bottom of the pyramid on the income side, right? Consumption has remained weak, and therefore, a lot of pressure on the government to redistribute or reprioritize expenditure, right? Now, how do you assess the budget? I think the very first thing that I find in this budget is it's very, very consistent. And why is consistency important? All of your management students, investors, agencies, or asset classes, they value consistency the most, right? Only then can you look at returns, risk-adjusted returns, etc. And when I say the government has been very, very consistent, they have maintained a couple of themes. So the first one is fiscal consolidation. Now, first, why is consistency so important? I think you have the example of the United Kingdom government, right, under Truss. There was this joke floating around, you would have seen, that she could not outlast a veggie, right? I mean, there were multiple jokes or memes depending on what you saw. Basically, she could not outlast a green veggie or vegetable because they went in for a very strange fiscal experiment. And therefore, there have been policy flip-flops from the biggest of the governments or the countries that they cite as the model for capitalism, the United States, UK, even the likes of IMF, who really preach the emerging economies on how to behave under certain economic circumstances. So in a context like that, the government has been very, very consistent. If you recall, from F14, 15, they have consistently brought down the fiscal deficit. This got reversed only when we got hit by the pandemic. But if you look at it as a trend line or a line chart, fiscal deficit has been coming off under this government. And why is bringing down fiscal deficit so important? Simply because when it does that, there is lesser pressure on inflation. The budget is not inflationary. It does not complicate the task of RBI, which has been raising interest rates, right, to combat inflation. So RBI will not have to raise interest rates from here on, maybe another 25 basis points in the upcoming meeting from RBI. But thereafter, they don't have to. And when inflation goes down, real incomes go up, right? And that is support to incomes and consumption in the economy. Apart from that, fiscal consolidation or fiscal discipline is also liked by investors and rating agencies. So your sovereign ratings, it reflects well on sovereign ratings of India. The rupee holds in terms of value, and this, all of these are gains to the consumer, to the country, etc., etc. Right? So this is fiscal consolidation. It sounds very counterintuitive that if you bring down the spending in the economy or compress expenditure, how can it really support consumption? Typically, intuitively, we think that the more the expenditure, the more support to consumption, incomes, etc. But in the context of very high debt to GDP ratios and the inflation combat that most central banks or most countries have resorted to, this is a very, very sound and consistent policy. So this is number one. Second, they have gone in for capex. So the first C I spoke about was consistency. Now capex. Now why is capital expenditure important? All of you know that there are two line items on the expenditure side: revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. Capital expenditure gives you or buys you growth in the future, right? Whereas revenue expenditure is, here and now, and does not really buy you future growth. To put it very simply. Now the government has prioritized spending via expenditure on the capital side, which is more productive. A lot of studies conducted find that every rupee spent on capital expenditure gives you 3 rupees back in terms of growth, in terms of jobs, in terms of asset creation, right? Whereas every rupee spent on revenue expenditure is about 0.99 or say equivalent bang for the buck. So obviously this is much better in terms of quality of expenditure, and they have raised this expenditure to 10 lakh crore this year. And in YY terms, this is 33% higher. So qualitatively, they are spending much more on something that gives you better bang for the buck. It also has advantage in terms of creating jobs and incomes. Why do I say that? 90% of rural jobs that are created come from investments in infrastructure on the hinterland, right? So these are basically construction jobs. So when you spend on infrastructure, it is distributed across the country. So you're not creating regional skews or problems or maybe say boosting incomes in one particular state or one particular geography or region. It is well distributed. So the benefits of your spending will be spread out across the economy. Job creation will happen across the economy in the hinterland, urban, rural, and all of that. Whereas, suppose you were to give incremental, say 10% or 20% on revenue expenditure. Suppose you are giving some goodies or doles to a certain consuming class. Depending on the income class, the benefit gets only to that particular segment, right? So there is this problem of skew, there is this problem of favoring a particular class versus the other, and therefore this is more democratic, this is more well spread out. Plus, like I mentioned, every rupee that you spend gives you 3 rupees back over say 3 to 5 years. And therefore this is very, very important. The other C, the last C that I want to talk about is credibility. And then Dr. Sivakumar spoke about the credibility thing. If you look at the numbers, in terms of revenues or expenditure. Like I said, revenue growth is in line with the nominal GDP number. Typically, that's the relationship that holds over a long period of time. If your nominal GDP is growing at say 10.57%, it should, your tax revenues will grow in line. The same holds true for corporates and all business entities or incomes of economic agents in a particular economy, right? Tax revenues are likely to remain around that 10.5-11% mark. In fact, I would say they have been a little conservative. They have under-promised and over-delivered on the tax collections over the last say 2 years. And I think even this year they have left some juice by underestimating the nominal GDP. So that this could be a small addition during the year if inflation were to remain 5.5%, or growth, the real growth is higher. On the expenditure side, I find that the revenue expenditure, which is growing at say 25 lakh crores, can be slightly problematic during the year. Suppose the monsoon fails. So basically what I'm saying is revenue expenditure is not growing at all. It is growing from a YY perspective just 1%, right? It is flat. And this is the biggest revenue, biggest line item on the expenditure side, right? So of the 45 lakh crore the government is going to spend, 35 lakh crore is revenue expenditure. And this is growing by just 1.2%. So what happens if there is a domestic accident? In the sense, suppose the monsoon fails and SkyMet has come up with a scare saying that monsoon in the second half would really become erratic. So if you have to do that, how will you really be able to spend on say fertilizer or food subsidy? So please remember the revenue expenditure is being compressed and subsidies are going down by 34%, 34% depending on which line item you're looking at. And this can really pose problems on the fertilizer subsidy, food subsidy, or even petroleum subsidy. So tomorrow, for example, on the global side, the Russia-Ukraine war really intensifies.
Our issue, Subhash, is hello? Hello?
Seems to be a reserve.
Sir? Hello? Hello?
I just speak to him now. Yes, almost counting now.
Yeah, others are able to hear. Just speak to somebody.
Is everyone else able to hear me?
Yes. Yeah, okay, so it's a problem.
It is his problem. I will just talk to him and tell him to join a little later. You can have Mr. Rajesh.
So, but I had a couple of observations which I thought. One is that, while we call it a welfare positive, the surcharge over income above 5 crores has been quite substantially reduced. I know a lot of corporate friends who are very delighted about it. But was that the priority for the government? And what was the thought process behind that? Because, we have, you all have been reading that we have produced maximum number of billionaires in the country in the last couple of years. So reducing the charge and reducing the tax burden of billionaires, should that be the priority for a country like India? Is one question that I had. The second one is that because I have been with companies that invest in R&D, and we always find that the budget 2 years ago reduced any incentives for further investment in R&D. I think that for corporates in India, this is a high priority, and anything that government can do to increased investment in R&D is extremely important because the future of sustainable businesses really rests on how much you invest, how much of IP you create, how much of new kind of solutions. And the world is ripe for new solutions because of climate change and sustainability, etc. So again, why hasn't this been in the map of our policymakers that R&D should be increased in the country, particularly private investment in R&D? And why has there been no kind of concerted effort in that? So just two questions that came up in my mind.
I have the same questions.
As a request, Jack, you must listen 5 minutes to
No, I will.
I think very relevant points. On a serious note, I had similar observations on the income tax part of it. I think just to step back, we should not expect everything to be covered in the budget statement. So I hope that, and there were representations made on actually both these issues to the government and to the minister. They are having meetings today with the minister and debriefing in terms of what the public has.
Parthasarathy has received invitation
Yeah.
to meet
Tomorrow is
FM.
18 finance.
Yes, yes. So there are all these meetings that are going on, and the ministry is now taking feedback from people like us and people who can represent us. And some of these, and there are many more, there's a whole huge list of things which we are representing. Every sector, every industry, including the investment industry, we have certain questions about why this didn't get done, what about this? So I think they get done. But I think both the points that you raised are pretty relevant, and there are no clear answers to that. Corporate R&D, I think as we position India as a superpower in the global scenario, Sir just said we are going from number 5 to number 2. It just cannot happen without really original research and development in the country. We cannot remain an economy that will keep copying others in the West and doing the same thing in a cheaper fashion or different fashion. We have to be ingenuous in that respect. There's no question about that. R&D has to be a focus area, not just for corporates, but even for educational institutions, IITs, and the likes. So I think it's across the board. On the tax part of it, I think I'm very happy when I saw the budget because they really didn't tinker much. And going into the budget, I kept telling everybody who I spoke with that I hope they don't do anything. I hope it's a very boring budget because what's happening around us, I think we're on a good path. There's no need to tinker much with either the budget or anything else that's happening in the economy. And I was really scared going into the budget this time because this is the last full budget that the government is presenting before elections next year. And like you mentioned in your presentation, and there's some research to support that when you're getting into elections, there's a bias to really spend more and more, and like Sachidanand was also saying, more on the revenue side. But what we've seen is actually a very positive surprise that the revenues expenditure is gone up by just about 1.2%. But on the capex side, the expenditure increase is actually 33%, which is pretty substantial. And I hope that really these projects get done. And the good news on that part of it, on the capex part of it, is that the day before we had the economic survey, which actually presented a very positive picture on the capital expenditure happening on the private side. So I think, in my opinion, if the private side continues to deliver on the capital expenditure programs that they have, all announced, and the government comes in on the public side and continues to spend the way they have budgeted, 10 lakh crore rupees, I think it's going to be fantastic for the next 3-5 years. That's on these 2 points.
So there was also expectation that there will be much simplification in terms of the whole tax part. Nothing much happened on that.
Yeah, nothing happened. I'm very thankful nothing happened. Yeah, so I think the only thing on the tax part actually was pretty positive for, India, I always keep saying, we are still a poor country. We living in Mumbai and Delhi and Bangalore, we are not India, we're just a very small sliver of India. India still is a poor country. And every effort, every budget or every government policy is actually targeted towards uplifting, so that nobody is left behind. And so even if you see the tax tinkering that they've done, and this is one of those, in addition to the one that you mentioned, is also they've done something in terms of the capital gains on beyond 10 crore residential investments or real estate investments. So I think those are the 2 things they've done. But I think if you look at the aggregate, by moving the tax slab from the 5 lakh rupees to 7 lakh rupees, and some small tinkering, they actually released roughly estimated about 35,000 crores in the hands of a lot of people. So the amount is really not huge, but the number of people who are going to be benefited and will have money to spend is a whole lot more. And I think that is what, according to me, is a huge positive, because that is the real India. You know, the middle income group, the lower income group. If you give money in their hands, then consumption really goes up. And you all know that there are two engines that are driving India. One is the consumption story, and second is the infrastructure story. So I think this budget, without ruffling too many feathers, has actually catered to both of those engines.
Thank you. Thank you.
He may continue, right?
No, I think he said okay. He must have finished it. You should have yours.
We may take him when the questions are being asked.
So while we had Dr. Sachdanand Shukla, Chief Economist, Mahindra and Mahindra, on the virtual meet that was on Zoom, we thank him for his presence there, although he was lost midway.
He's there still, yes,
अच्छा.
now it is restored, but
He
yeah.
joined.
We are joining.
Okay. With that, I would like to mention our honor to have amongst us Mr. Rajesh Sehgal, CFA, MBA, Managing Partner, Equanimity Investments. Mr. Rajesh is a long-term investor with tremendous breadth and depth of experience managing early-stage investments, private equity and public equity funds for over 2 decades. A Wharton alumnus, Exelerite Management graduate and a CFA charter holder, Mr. Rajesh has the distinction of being the founding chair of the India chapter of Corporate Reporting Users Forum. He is a board member of the Mumbai chapter of the Indus Entrepreneur, a global non-profit community that works to help entrepreneurs in all ways. At TIE, Rajesh is a co-chair of the FinTech Focus Special Group that spearheads TIE's Mumbai focus efforts to help the FinTech community. We are grateful for your presence. You can take over.
Thank you. Thanks.
Take it.
So, as I was, you would have gathered from my initial comments, I'm pretty positive about the budget. I think it's, by not doing too much, it's done a lot for the country. It's fantastic. And like Sachin mentioned earlier as well, that this is not the first time that it's a good budget has come out. It follows with a string of positive developments and focused budget that we've seen over the last few years by this government and the previous one as well. I think one of the points that Sir also brought out in his presentation was about credibility. And if I were to sum up this entire budget in one word, I think that's credible. Why is it credible? A few ways to look at it. So whenever we are doing a budgeting exercise, there are two sides that we are looking at. The revenue side and the expenditure side. Essentially, we do that for our households as well, right? When you are or whatever pocket money that we have, we do an estimate of how much pocket money I'm going to get and then where I'm going to splurge it at your stage of life. So the budget is something like that. And I think on both the counts, in terms of the assumptions that have gone into the revenue side of this equation, and the assumptions that the government has taken on the expenditure side of the equation as well, I think for once I can tell you they are very credible. So for example, when you are doing this whole budget exercise, the fulcrum of this entire exercise is what is the nominal GDP growth that you are estimating, because everything stems from that. To achieve that GDP growth, you are going to spend some money, and that spending money is going to result in some revenue. So I think if we get that number right, or in the ballpark of reality, then the quality of the budget exercise is really superior. And I'm very happy to say that the nominal budget expectation that the finance minister has put forward is 10.5%, which I think is very, very good. Right? I hope we beat that number, but it's extremely doable. Now, because that number, the fulcrum of this entire exercise, seems to be a very credible number, if you look at some of the other proposals that the government has put forth, or the assumptions that they've taken on the revenue and expenditure side, they all come out to seem very, very realistic. Right? And again, as I said, this is the last budget that they have before the election. So the temptation to really splurge money and to have a very populist kind of budget, which essentially is what we've seen before every election. That temptation is huge. And not to yield to that temptation, I read it in two ways. right? One is that you are very confident that you are going to be the next government also, so there's no need to pander to populist things. And the second way to look at it is that you really delivered so much in the past and you want to continue on that path, and therefore you deliver this kind of budget, which means there is some delinking between populist needs of the government and the realist quality of the budget that they put forth. So as I said, either way you say it's, I think they've done pretty well. As I said, on the revenue side, the assumptions that they've taken in terms of how much tax is going to be collected, on the expenditure side, the subsidy bill, how much is that going to be? I think both these numbers, and these are two movers and shakers typically, which disrupt the quality of the budget numbers that they put out. I think both these numbers are again, very realistic. As I said, the budget is very boring, so what I'm going to say is also going to be a repetition a lot, because that's how a budget should be. By the way, the budget exercise in India, we give it a lot of importance. There are a few reasons to that. One very simply is that as an economy that is still developing, and we are still not a developed economy, I think there has been too much volatility in terms of budgeting exercises from year to year. And so people like us, the common man, has been common man and common woman, if to be politically correct nowadays. So the common folks like us have really been left to wonder what's going to hit us when the budget gets announced. What new is coming up, etc. And so therefore the importance to this entire budget exercise has been far outweighing what actually it should be. So if you look at every country, sir said there are 100 plus, 200 plus countries that publish these budget exercises. But none of the other countries, most of them actually, you never heard of this as a big exercise, except in a few countries, including India, where we are all looking forward to budget, and after the budget, we all need to meet and scratch our heads and figure out what actually happened, how is it going to impact the nation, how is it going to impact our businesses, how is it going to impact us on a personal level, because the taxation is always changed. And I think I've seen this trend since at least over the last 10 to 15 years, is that the importance of this whole budget exercise is diminishing. It's still very important, it's an important document to have, but the volatility or the uncertainty that comes out of that exercise is actually going down. Again, that is a tremendous positive, because if you and I stop bothering about too much what the government is doing on the budget day, it I think shows that it's not going to change our lives much. Second way to look at it is that some of you may belong to very rich families and rich houses where there is nothing called as a budget. You don't need to budget, you have too much of it. Right? Something will come from here, somewhere will go. You don't bother too much about budget. But again, the middle level, lower level people like us, we will have, every day we'll sit down and say, okay, let's think about this year, whether my salary will go up by 10% or 20%, and then, where will I spend it? How will I buy my house? I want to buy a bike, I want to buy a car. We all have to think about all of that, right? So I think it's also a reflection that India is slowly, gradually on the path to becoming, a better equipped, well-equipped nation. We are still not a developed market, as I said, but we are on that path. So I think that's positive as well. One last note that I want to share on this is the entire fiscal management, the fiscal deficit that we're talking about. There's a target that the government has put out. There's a long-term target, and there was a target for this year, for the next year, and I think 6.4% going to 5.9%, and eventually in 2 years' time they're saying we'll reach that 4.5% magic number. We seem to be on track. It's still not going to be very, very easy. There are too many ifs and buts. So I think if you are on that path, that's again fantastic. I hope we achieve those numbers. And I think lastly, if you all remember that we have this whole target of being a $5 trillion economy. Sir shared with us in the morning that we are at about 3.1, 3.2 trillion now. So there's still a long way to go, and therefore budget exercises, till then remain important, because we have to ensure that whatever policies we are putting forward, whatever money we are spending, which areas we are spending on, whether that is capital expenditure or revenue expenditure, they all have to lead us towards a common goal. And I think the common goal that all of us now have is that $5 trillion number. and that number seems, within the grasp. Again, it's not easy, it's not a given. We are only at 3.2, we have to reach 5. It's a long way off. But the policies, like Sachinanand also shared in his presentation, that the policies are not for immediate benefit for everyone. The benefits of this, for every dollar that we invest, the $3 that we talked about, is going to be reaped by us, people like us, over the next 3 to 5 years, and that is going to put us onto this path of 5 trillion. I think those are my comments. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for your words, sir. I'm pretty sure you have provoked the young minds present here in this room as well on the call. Now, next, I would like to welcome Shri S. Rajagopalan, former General Manager of Bank of Maharashtra, who has joined us virtually, and he will be taking the case forward.
Open the APD. Yes.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, sir. We're just opening up your presentation. Just a minute.
May I request for the PPT?
Yes, sir.
Honorable Shastri. Dr. Ashok Kumar, Dr. Ashok Prasanna, my earlier speakers, faculty members, and the future leaders of India who are over there. It was really nice to get a debriefing from the earlier speakers. I will directly go into the select areas of the present budget. Many countries' growth is seen by the parameter of GDP, and we talked about the welfare and growth in the budget. I thought it is relevant to see how this growth is applicable to young generation, the MSME, industry and agriculture. So first of all, we go to the youth. For youth, the first thing which impressed me in the current budget was about the technology in the form of 5G. As you are aware, 5G, next page, 5G can really bring a great number of good things for the community. About 100 labs for developing applications using 5G have been initiated. Other point of growth where people are concerned is the job. Here they have come out with a national apprentice promotion scheme, which will provide standard support for about 47 lakh youth in the next 3 years. Likewise, we talk about better medical facilities for our country. There are 157 new nursing colleges are being started in collaboration with the existing colleges. And we always compare our medical facilities with that of foreign countries. Yes, so a lot of focus is being given for the medical research. Now, ICMR and other research institutes currently is being encouraged on a follow-up basis. Side by side, the pharma program has been initiated to promote the research and innovation in public sector. Again, today we will go to a lab for practice, so not everything is high-tech and not like the manual in the earlier days. So, multidisciplinary courses for usage of medical devices has been started in these institutions. Again, there are the teaching faculty which is the backbone of any educational institution. So here the teachers training through NEVET pedagogy with a curriculum, continuous professional development, basic surveys, HCT is being and being implemented. Again impressed me for the National Digital Library. Now right from a 3-year-old child, everybody is tech savvy. So the digital library is being promoted for children and adolescents where one can access n number of material and books sitting at the comfort of the home. Again, the National Book Trust and Children's Book Trust identified the sources for non-curricular titles in regional as well as English. So here the non-curricular titles are very important for the individual development and for the country's development. Now we talk of India as a better for these artisans and skill level. Here there is one Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana 4.0 which is going to improve the skills for youth by way of on-the-job training, then industry partnership. More importantly, the aligning the courses. Now what is happening? When a student studying a particular course, when you go for a job, they find it totally different. So alignment with the course is very important from the job perspective. And of course, the new age courses, high-tech, artificial intelligence, robotics, electronics, machine learning, Internet of Things, all are to be part of the curriculum for better approach. So next we come to the MSME, which is also the backbone of growth for any economy. Now we call it as a growth engine for India. In the present budget, the government has announced 9,000 crores as a purpose for the collateral fee scheme. See, when you want to start a business, the first thing the lender will ask is for a collateral, which is not possible in all the cases. So a good entrepreneur with a good idea can get a loan up to 2 crores by coming under this scheme which is called Credit Guarantee Scheme for MSMEs, CGT. And the another benefit for MSMEs in the present budget is a percentage taxation. So MSMEs with up to 3 crore turnover and professionals who are also coming under the service enterprise, some professionals up to turnover of 35 lakhs, they are coming under the percentage taxation. And one condition is that they do not have cash which is more than 5%. This means they are encouraging more digital money and accounted money. Another indirect benefit to MSMEs is the big corporates always delay payment to the MSMEs. So, that reduction for expenditure incurred on payment made to MSMEs can be done only when the actual payment is made, so that the MSMEs will get payment in time. India is famous in models terms. They are impressed by our arts and crafts and other traditional products in India. To encourage this, the government has come out with the PM Vikas scheme where the artisans will be enabled to improve their quality, scale of production, and teach their products, integrating them is MSME value chain. The one new term is the Unity Mall, which they identified one product for one district, and each district will have a Unity Mall where the products of all over India will be displayed. So, a tourist or a domestic person, when they visit the Unity Mall, they can purchase these products. Another relief for the MSMEs, you are aware that during the COVID period, there were a lot of problems for MSMEs for executing their contracts as well as completing the production. So, wherever there is a government or government undertaking contract which they could not execute and they are required to forfeit the amount of bid money or performance guarantee, the government will be refunding the amount to these people up to 90%. And you have heard of DigiLocker, which is a soft storage for the documents. The same will be set up for MSMEs also, where they do not strictly produce the documents like Udyam certificate or other certificate of incorporation and etc. Now, for this, they are coming up with a unified Skill India digital platform where they will enable the demand-based skilling and making the employees for MSME for facilitating entrepreneurs across the scheme where suppose I am skilled in a particular area, say electrical, I can go to the platform and find out which are the MSMEs are looking for employment for the particular area. Another important thing we call of empowering women is empowering the country. So they come out with the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana for National Rural Livelihood Mission. Here you have heard of self-help groups where a group of women come to do a business on a small or medium scale. Now 81 lakh SHGs or self-help groups will be targeted to reach the next step of development through large producer enterprises. Now, the next point is about the industries. We talked about the MSME, now we come to the other industries, like startups. The startups in India has been a reasonably good success, where many startups have come up to the global level. So one benefit that this budget is giving for the tax benefits for startup is incorporation date is extended from March 23 to March 24, that is next year. Similarly, the startups used to get, whenever there is a change of shareholding, they used to get the benefit of carry forward losses. So this was earlier 7 years from the corporation. Now the 7 years is made increased to 10 years from the date of corporation. And there is a new program to promote this innovation in pharmaceuticals, which will be done through technical excellence. Then we talk of artificial intelligence. Earlier we say make in India. Now we can make artificial intelligence in India and make artificial intelligence work for India. So with this new vision, the 3 centers of excellence for artificial intelligence will be set up in top education institutions. Again, the one industry is diamond industry where India accounts for more than 3/4 of the world trade. Now with natural resources becoming scarce, they are going to promote lab-grown diamonds, which is an artificial diamond but with all the qualities of the real diamond. And to seize this opportunity, the custom duty is going to be reduced on the seeds used for the manufacture. Now coming to the capital investments, see for industries, the capital outlay as earlier speakers put elaborately is being increased to 10 crores, which will be 3.3% of GDP. Again, in this private investment in the infrastructure is being enhanced, particularly for the new projects where private investment will be participated. Now, there is a list of infrastructure. Now, they are going to harmonize this and improve the list of infrastructure where more areas will be covered. As you are aware, this railways is getting 2.4 lakh crores as a capital outlay, which is unprecedented. And likewise, 100 critical transport infrastructure facilities are being made with a budget capacity of 5,000 crores, including 15,000 from the private sources. The next one is regional connectivity, where the 50 airports and other priority capital investments are being connected through the common air connectivity. Then there is a common business identifier by way of PAN card, PAN account number, which will be used as a common identifier for all the digital systems. Then there is also a unified filing process where now one is required to file papers, different departments for different approvals. All will be very unified now. And next, now coming to energy transition. Now, as far as the energy transition concern, a massive 35,000 crore is being set up for energy transition and net zero objectives. We talk of renewable energy, which is very important today, and a system has been developed of evacuation and grid integration of 13 gigawatts of renewable energy from product with investment of 50,700 crores. Now, when we talk of green, many times we only talk, but the actual doesn't happen. So, for encouraging corporates and individuals to really become green and protect the environment, they are coming out with some incentive program, which is called Green Credit Program, where there will be financially incentivized under the program, work for which will be coming under the Environment Protection Act. Now, one more industrial area where development is envisaged is the tourism industry, where at least 50 destinations will be selected through a challenge mode, and focus is given to these places for encouraging domestic as well as foreign tourism. And as you are aware, tourism is one thing which is going to bring a lot of foreign exchange to the country and revenue to the country. Examples are Malaysia and other places where tourism only they are trying. The next one is regarding
This is the next slide.
now, as we saw, out of the GDP, more than 20% come from agriculture. The industry and service sector contribute for the 69%. Now, when agriculture is contributing substantially, a digital public infrastructure for agriculture will be built as an open source. Here, what they mean? See, last time when I visited USA, I saw some of the farmlands where you will find they are highly mechanized. You won't find any. There will be, see, for example, through satellite they find out the quality of the soil, what is the quality. Then they find out what is the possible weather prediction and which crop is suitable. So, like they use the technology to find out by for a given land how much maximum production can be achieved. So that this concept is to be more popularized among the rural areas and farmers of India. This will also include farmer-centric solutions for relevant information services today through apps and other information available to mobile phone also. And for this, agriculture accelerator fund will be set up to encourage agricultural startups who will support these activities. Now, the extra balance capital cotton is going to develop on a cluster-based basis and a value chain approach through public-private partnership. Now we come to the last part of the financial sector. What the government budget is in for the financial sector. See, firstly, the SEBI has been empowered to enforce. Today we talk about the stock market, it's having a lot of ups and downs. So the education for this area is being encouraged through National Institute of Security Market and to recognize the award of degrees, diplomas, etc. So that the financial literacy will be more. And the process of nowadays government decides the regulation imposes on the public. Now they are going to make the process of regulation and directions by a suggestive process from public as well as regulated entities. This is really a good move, where even you and I can make a suggestion for a particular regulation in the financial system. And once this is done, bank governance and investor protection can be improved by amending the Banking Regulation Act, Banking Companies Act, and RBI Act. Now, next is the they are going to have a central processing center for faster response of companies under the Companies Act for various filings. One more area is the reclaiming of shares and unpaid dividends. With the time, a dedicated IT portal will be developed where you can directly log into the portal and get the unpaid dividends, etc. Now, coming to fintech and digital payment, as you are aware, today even you can make a small payment to a chanawala or a distributor vendor on the roadside through digital payment to UPI mode. Now, this 76% will increase in transactions and 91% value last year. This physical support will be continued for the next year also. And lastly, for the women, the Mahila Salman Savings Certificate, which is a is true. 2 year period will be in vogue for 2 lakhs for deposit of 7.5%. It's a withdrawal option. So children are also covered in this. Girl child is covered. So as the earlier speaker told, senior citizen saving scheme increased from 15 to 30 lakhs at a very high rate of interest than the market. And the states have been given a 50-year interest-free loan, which they will be spending on the capital expenditure. So thus you will find that the results are seen today of the fintech services, what they call a JAM Trinity, that is Aadhaar, mobile, and Jandan Yojana, where the lower side of this one is having covered 41.8 crores general exports are there, where 2.2 lakh crores has been transferred under the DBT. And finally, there is the Gujarat International Finance Tech City, which is the first in India for international finance. Here, what they have done is to develop already international financial services is there. So they are now decentralizing and giving powers to them under the Special Economic Zone Act to avoid dual regulation. As you are aware, we go to the next slide, where the IFSCs, that is financial service centers, will be given permission for acquiring the foreign banking units, and Exim Bank is going to establish subsidiary for refinancing, and accordingly the acts will be amended. So we are now seeing the different areas, MSME, as well as agriculture, where the budget is focusing. Once again, thank the college authorities for giving the opportunity. Thank you. Any clarifications? Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. That was quite insightful. Now the floor is open for questions. Any questions here can be directed to the panelists directly. And I would request the audience that has joined via virtual means to just drop in your question on the chat box, and I will read them out for the panelists. Thank you. So any questions, all of you can directly ask.
Yeah, till now, if you have been waiting for the question, please, I taught this class, economic indicators course, and now the second course.
I don't need mine.
He was very active in the class, he wants to know economics.
We all want to know economics.
So basically, I guess we as a country are very much positioned in a very favorable state. We enjoy 4D right now: demographics, digitalization, decarbonization, as well as deglobalization. As well as Professor Shiv Kumar had mentioned that since last all the budget outlays, we have maintained a magic number of 12 to 15% of the total GDP. So right now, after few things have happened, like pandemic had come, opportunities opening up in our economies, which we could see favorable outcomes in terms of PLIs. Shouldn't we have extended our pockets a bit, not focus on the fiscal prudence? First point. And second is on the defense budget outlay. If you see, it's 2.9% of the GDP, but 38% goes in the revenue, salary part, and 25% goes on the procurement of weapons. I guess we should have considered that certain percentage on procurements of modern weapons, so that we as an economy are socially secure. And third thing is on the corporate tax. Most of the global economies are opting a system called flat minimal tax. So I guess this has been in talk since last 3-4 years, yet government has no say on that. A 15% minimum corporate tax will definitely attract a lot of investments in India. So why is the government silent on that?
Let me take a go at this, and then other panelists from the joint also we can also pitch in. So 3 things. I don't remember all 3 in the order. The second one was defense.
The defense outlay. The first was the 4Ds
The 4D.
Yeah. Demographic, digital.
Yeah, not all of them are positive, by the way. Deglobalization may not necessarily be a good thing for all of us. Everything has its pros and cons.
Yes.
So I think I like your 4Ds after Satyanand's 3 Cs. So I think the 5E, who's 5E now? So I think you have a point. So on all 4, India is walking the path. And one budget, this current budget that, with this lens, if you are looking at it, the budget is not making India progress substantially on all 4 paths. Right? So some of them will be achieved, some of them will be, these are all 4 of them, by the way, that you talked about are all longer term aspirations that India has. Right? And I think we are firmly on that path, like I did, shared in my introduction as well, that overall, if you look at this budget, where it fits in with the path that India is at, we need to go get to that $5 trillion number. We need to do that by making sure that all sections of the economy are catered to. We're not leaving anyone behind. So these are not simple things to achieve. So you will have to make compromises in some places or the other. Right? So that's on your 4D aspect. On defense, I think it's a very structural problem. It's not a problem of today. The revenue expenditures within the defense industry in India, within the government's defense establishment, salary levels have been at those levels for a long time, but if you look at the trend over a long term, it's coming off. And defense for India, whether we like it or not, we need those people, we need those boots on the ground. We are blessed with all the neighbors that we have, right? So you have to it's something that you can't compromise on. It is not a matter of numbers in an Excel sheet that, okay, let's bring this down a little bit more and we can do something else elsewhere. These are essentials. Right? Without a good defense, without a good presence across the border, more or less we used to have porous borders, by the way. Over the last few years, how many times have you heard about people crossing over the border and skirmishes on the, at least on the western side? Eastern side, again, a lot of work going on. I'm working very closely with a few defense companies. It's all technology, new age companies. The kind of equipment that they're working on, the kind of technologies that they're working on to make sure that the borders are secure is amazing. I mean, I'm so impressed. You and I in our regular daily life don't interact much with that part of the world, and we don't understand what's happening there. But when you do, you'll be amazed at the amount of work that's going on there. Again, this doesn't happen every year, but this expenditure that we are doing, both for equipment, making sure that we are well equipped, and also making sure that the people who are defending us are taken care of is essential. In fact, PLI you mentioned briefly in your comment is one of those things where last year the government made it mandatory for certain equipment to be procured from within India. Even though, for all these years, 60, 70 years, we've been relying on Russia, Israel, etc., not only for the equipment, but also for the spare parts. So, GEM.
Small EM. Global, Government Electronic Marketplace.
So there's a platform that there's a platform that they've made, and any procurement that is being done by these government departments have to be done on that platform. So you and I, as suppliers to the government, will have to bid for those contracts. And those contracts are given to Indian manufacturers, right, exclusively for certain categories that they laid out. We couldn't even think of this a few years back because India didn't have the capability of manufacturing those things within the country. Like I was sharing, so it's not just that you're buying Bofors tanks or Bofors guns. Something goes wrong in that gun, you got to go and procure it from where you source the equipment from, which is a huge delay. Imagine you're fighting a war or you're trying to defend the border and there are no spare parts. What do you do? So I think this indigenization is important. So defense budget going up, I think is a must, and at least if I am to opine, I think next few years you will see that trend.
I guess I'm okay with defense budget going up, but the percentage of the outlay on procurement of the modern weapons when it compares to the revenue expenditure of the defense spend, at least it should be par.
Yeah. We are on that path, like I said. We are not going to be able to achieve that immediately. But if you look at the defense outlay for the last, let's say, 10 years, you will see a clear trend. See, we are going down that path. And this is not just defense, by the way. This problem exists within the railways also.
Yes.
This problem also existed a few years back within the public sector companies as well, where the number of employees had bloated up so much and the budget was going there, not being used to modernize, let's say railways. The similar thing. Why don't we have all these super bullet trains that every other country has. Because the budget outlay that we had was going inordinately high amount was going to take care of people. Now you can't wish away people. You can't wish away those people who actually created that institution. So it's a process. It will take time. But as you can see in the number, it's not just my view. We are on that path.
So on the minimal corporate tax part.
Again, something is good to have, right? But it's not. It doesn't move the needle too much. I don't think so. As long as, like I said in my opening comment as well, we have 35,000 crores that has been given to us in our pockets. At least the lowest strata of society, people who are at the lower levels of annual income. I think that's amazing. And people who are really making the money might as well pay tax. Why not? I don't see anything wrong in that. And if you look at other developed markets today, developed economies, the US and Europe, etc., their tax rates are not zero. They are paying substantial amount of tax even now. So if you and I as citizens demand certain things from the government, we have to pay for it. And unfortunately in India, the pyramid, the population pyramid is such that like I said, Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, all the rich people, we are just a small sliver. So it is, whether we like it or not, it is the responsibility of this section to really support, a lot. And that is where, when you look at these budgets, and you tie everything, everything is interconnected. When you look at this budget or a few other budgets where there's a lot of expenditure on the capital side, these expenditures will make sure that that everybody is taken care of, and eventually, as after a few years or decades, you will not have few people supporting everybody else. Look at the number of taxpayers in the country. We had hardly any. I mean, go back 10 years, go back 20 years. Small section. I mean, decimal point of the entire population was paying taxes. Right? They were filing returns, but there were hardly any taxes being paid. That number is inched up. And very well. So we need to make sure that we are all, making sure the country is progressing as one, and therefore it's a shared responsibility going forward.
So one last question. Your stance on UBI, Universal Basic Income. I guess that's something more or less it's happening in the closed economies, not very much known to the global world. But I guess the way the artificial intelligence and machine learning are taking over jobs, UBI is basically something to be talked in the budget for. The government did implement, it did cost 4.9% of the GDP in few states of India. Some went successful and some went, but there's no report yet out there.
UBI is an experiment, not just in India, by the way, globally. Even the developed economies in Europe, where this whole thing started, that everybody should have a certain basic income, whether you're working or not, is a great idea to have. But you really need. It's an experiment. There are a lot of pros and cons to this whole UBI thing. I think, in my limited experience with certain schemes of the government, where the government was saying, okay, you come to the villages and you do some work, or you don't do some work, and we'll give you this much per hour. It's been going on for more than 15 years. It's not been good. It's not been very positive. There are mixed outcomes so far. So for UBI to be successful, I think India is not the country where UBI is a priority. We have many other challenges to overcome before we say, okay, it's a good thing that, and even the World Bank has acknowledged, IMF has acknowledged that the number of people that India has taken out of poverty, no other economy has done that. So we are addressing that problem in so many other ways. So UBI, as I said, is an experiment which I don't think India is ready for it yet.
So, and India cutting, at the budget cutting back on a few of the subsidies, the chemical subsidies, as well as the allocation towards NREGA and MNREGA, where the government jumping on elections next year.
Unbelievable, right? It's a huge positive. When you're going into an election year, you would anticipate MNREGA and all these other schemes to, people completely populist budget.
Yes.
They have not done that. Huge, applause to them for doing that. I think it's good. It's great.
Thank you.
So you want to write something?
No, just quickly, 2-3 indigenization projects. Kalashnikov 203 series, significant savings, point number 1. I want to spend already alert I have received. So there is some thinking in this direction, and our head of government is the biggest negotiator of the world today. Whether others compliment him or no, I definitely comment. Rafale, if you try to put the plant here, you are gone. As a country, you would go for a toss. We don't have so much of capital. We have to import, whether it is 1667 crores a unit, you can't help it. If you are importing, Assam rifle may cost 25,000. If you make it in Amethi, Uttar Pradesh, it would cost 7,200 rupees. The other one, I would suggest you to read Narega fudged in some states. I don't know whether it's there in the public domain. I am not very sure. February 29, not in a leap year. February 30, that is incidentally the birthday of late Morarji Desai, February 29. Only finance minister to have presented two budgets on his birthday in the world, in the recorded history, is late Morarji Desai, 29th February. So, non-leap year, 29th February, 30th February, 31 February, accounts people have checked that tens of thousands of workers under the scheme, they have been disbursed through treasury. So let's not use our heart while analyzing certain things. Let us use our brains also. I don't have any hesitation. Manipulation. We are not a corrupt-free economy. Page 1, part B, late Jaitley's budget speech 17-18, first page. We are a dishonest economy. As late as 17-18 budget presentation, probably that was his last. First page, second and third paragraph, he narrates, quoting the finance ministry and IT details, the rich people versus the disclosure of 10 lakh rupees as a taxable income. He has given beautiful statistics. And as a learned advocate, he said, all that I can say that as a society we are a tax, dishonest kind of some terms he has used. So there are certain issues, and when time comes, government definitely will be benevolent towards even the large corporates. They will be benevolent towards our people who really deserve. But there are some efforts which are worth complimenting, such as the capital investment, etc. Previously, blindly, I am not referring to politically government and party X or party Y. We were blindly importing even a Kargil shoe, 50,000 rupees pair. Take it or leave it. The war has started. 98-99 story. Shoe to withstand that weather, minus 45, minus 50 degrees Celsius. That's it. That is how international suppliers will exploit, whether it is for assault rifles, tanks, garments or shoes. They have it, and you got to use it. Price is not something that you would be negotiating at that stage. It is war. So there is some waking up towards that. We are doing fantastic job. Submarines, warships. We are doing it, all investments, but it takes time. You can't build it in less than 15-20 years. That is what is the late movers advantage that we have seen. Thank you. Sorry we would have taken more, but already we have exceeded, and we are apologizing to the professor who is supposed to start it now for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And with that, we conclude the Union Budget debrief session. We hope the session could facilitate you all with the breakdown of the latest budget and further understand its implication on the nation's economic progress.